Right. So without further ado, I'll just tell you a little bit about what we have in store for you tonight. Katja, if you can go to that agenda slide, I'll let you know that tonight is the public talk. So thank you for being here with us. We'll also be hosting a workshop next weekend. So don't miss your chance. There's still a few spots to sign up for that. And then if we go to the agenda, so you know what's going on this evening, we'll begin with a talk from Gabor. We'll be speaking for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll hear from Daniel for the same amount of time. And then we'll have a really special opportunity to hear father and son in conversation with one another, not something to be missed. And then we'll have a short break, so an invitation to stretch your legs, refresh your water, and then we'll come back for Q&A. That will be 45 or 50 minutes. So it's a long Q&A and really an invitation to engage with these wonderful presenters and knowledgeable researchers and speakers and writers. And so before I introduce Daniel and Gabor, we're getting to the main event. I just want to do a quick note to let you know, if you're ever looking for books that are by Dr. Maté, you can check out Banyan Books. Really incredible store. I actually just went there for the first time last week, and I picked this up on recommendation from my counselor, so I'm doing the work too. But Banyan Books is such a beautiful spot physically to go and explore a bookstore, and also all of those books are available online as well. And so it's time for the main event. Great to have everyone on here, and I will introduce just a brief introduction. There's so much to say, but Gabor Maté, as many of you know, is a retired physician. He's an internationally published author of 4 books, including the award-winning bestseller, The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction. Gabor is a public speaker in great demand, and he is the recipient of his country's highest honor, the Order of Canada, for his groundbreaking work on the links between excuse me, I'm just kind of quite excited to be here right now. Anyway, the links between trauma, addiction, and social issues, and on the mind-body unity in health and illness. We're so fortunate to have Dr. Maté and to have Daniel, who is just a powerhouse in his own right. Daniel Maté is a multi-award-winning songwriter in the field of musical theater. He's an Audie-nominated audiobook narrator, the co-author of 2 upcoming books with his father Gabor, which we'll touch on later tonight. And Daniel is a self-described mental chiropractor. You can find out some more on his website, which Katja will share in the chat there. And so without further ado, Gabor, I will invite you to take the virtual stage and lead the way for the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, thank you, Laurel, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th iteration of this workshop here in Vancouver, which we've also done in New York and in Toronto. Usually, the evening talk precedes the workshop, which would then ordinarily start tomorrow. But in this case, we thought we'd give it a week in between. So for those of you that are participating in the workshop, this is your introduction. For those of you that are just here for tonight, we'll hope to make this as complete as possible, an event in itself. I have to say that things have changed a lot since we began working together. It's hard for me to remember anymore how this workshop even arose as a possibility, but it certainly happened in coordination with someone who was a leader at Hollyhock at that time, Leslie Hoffman, in a conversation over lunch. And after we emerged from lunch, suddenly we had this workshop. What Diane and I perhaps didn't fully realize is just how tough it would be. And the toughness was not in presenting the material, but in working together. So those of you that were there at the first workshop, and any of you can check out the talk that we gave the first time in 2016, it's on YouTube. It's been seen by about 285,000 or so people. You can palpably cut the tension on the stage between us, which we never made any effort to hide. And indeed, we wouldn't even know how to hide it. So it was there. And that was not the that was not the end of the tension either, because even last year when we presented in Toronto, we had some real set-tos and misunderstandings and conflict. So I just want you to begin with the understanding that conflict between parents and children, um, it's certainly not unique to your family. In fact, in this culture, I don't know how prevalent it is, but I would say it's almost a norm. And I started thinking about it tonight. It's not just in this culture. I um, I was thinking about the Bible. Conflict between parents and children is biblical, at least in its provenance. It begins with some of the first generations. The children of Noah end up shaming him, if you check out the Bible. Then there's the son of King David, Absalom, and Absalom actually means father of peace. So this child named father of peace rebels against his father David and is killed in a battle between his forces and those of his father. Um, Jesus, or to give him his Aramaic name, Yeshua. If you read the New Testament, the Gospels, he comes into real conflict with his family. At some point, he says, they're not my family. My family are the people that follow God, and his family actually say that he's crazy, and they want to apprehend him. This is in the New Testament. So this is hardly a new thing. And if you look at the wisdom teachings, well, let me quote you from. I'm just reading a book right now on Jesus, being a good Jewish boy, and always trying to catch up with Jesus, and who was also another good Jewish boy. And this is Stephen Mitchell, who's a poet and a translator, and really a spiritual adept. And this is from his book, The Gospel According to Jesus. And so Stephen Mitchell writes, a couple of months after I began studying with my old Zen master, he said to me, you have three jobs here. Your first job is to kill the Buddha. I had read that phrase in the old Zen teachings, and I knew what it meant, to let go of any concepts of separate, superior, enlightened being outside myself. Then he said, your second job is to kill your parents. What does that mean? I asked. As long as there's anything you want from your parents, he said, or anything about them that upsets you, they will be an obstacle in your mind. Killing your parents means accepting them just as they are. They enter your mind like an image reflected on the water, no ripples. And I would say it's the same thing both ways. Because I think in thinking about this workshop this next weekend and what to say tonight, I was realizing that what really gets in the way of our relationships with anybody, but particularly our parents and our adult children, are our expectations. And a big disappointment is that they don't live up to our expectations. They are not what we want them to be. So killing them means killing our idealized expected image of them. Because the biggest wound I think that children experience from their parents is not that they're not loved. My children were loved, and I don't know that they ever doubted that they were loved as such, but I can tell you they were not seen. We as parents did not see them for who they were. We saw them through the lens of our own expectations and our own needs. And we saw them through the murkiness that we had in actually seeing ourselves very clearly. So I think the biggest disappointment, the biggest pain is not being seen. And I think if anybody of the listeners here, if you think about what really hurts you in your relationship with your child or with your parent, is that you don't perceive that you're seen. They don't get you. So getting the other, I think, is the most difficult task. And it's also the most painful wound when it doesn't happen. And it's not because of any lack of goodwill for the most part. So let's just acknowledge that generations have trouble seeing one another for all kinds of reasons. Now, the Italian writer Elena Ferrante said in one of her novels, "Is it possible that our parents never die, that every child inevitably conceals them in himself or herself?" Well, that's absolutely true too, whether you like it or not. And this is true both for the parents and for the children. We each of us carry our own parents inside ourselves. And very often, what gets in the way of seeing the other generation is what we're carrying that we took in from our parents. And this happens on many levels: psychological, social, emotional. It even happens biologically. Um, these days, there's a lot of attention paid to something called epigenetics. And epigenetics is how the functioning of our genes is modulated by the environment. And if something is genetic, it means that we pass on certain genes that carry certain traits. For the most part, that's not what happens. But epigenetics, how these genes are turned on and off by the environment, is a very powerful dynamic. And so, for example, in a very famous experiment, they exposed male mice to a certain flower smell and a scary image as well of a fox or a cat, so that the smell became associated with the fear. Even 3 generations later, mice who smelt that smell, who never were exposed to the fear, still reacted with fear. And this is totally unconscious. We just passed this on epigenetically. Um, Now, one of the things that have happened between Daniel and I is that Daniel has been helping me, co-working with me on writing a book. The book will be called The Myth of Normal, Illness and Health in an Insane Culture. And that'll be published fall of next year, we hope. We just completed it 3 weeks ago, the first draft. And I'll tell you, if you want to work out your relationship with your adult child, write a book together. Because we brought into this book writing all manner of strengths and challenges. And in writing this book with Daniel, um, he had to experience every unresolved aspect of his father's personality, including my anxieties that would just burst to the surface when I have a writer's block and I didn't know what to say. And I think Daniel can say more about this, but at times he found himself trying to regulate his father's emotions just so that we can get on with this job of writing the book together. So what I really appreciate about it is that by the time we finished writing the book, at least finished the first draft, the roles had really equalized. I was still necessarily with this topic generating the most of the ideas and the topics and material that goes into the book. But in terms of process, it became more than equal, so that at certain points, and particularly towards the end, Daniel increasingly took on a leadership role, which is really how it ought to be. At some point, as parents, we ought to be able to surrender. Not when I say surrender, I don't mean give up, but I mean hand over and allow ourselves to be led by our children. And that was a beautiful process for me, and a real relaxation for me, that, oh boy, this next generation has now got to the point where they can lead me. Maybe I didn't screw the whole thing up after all, I was able to say to myself. Now, speaking of epigenetics, I want to share with you one of Daniel's contributions to this book. We're talking about how you study epigenetics, and you study it by following different generations. Well, in human beings, that's very difficult because a human generation takes a long time from one to the next, hundreds of years to follow several generations. So you study mice because their generations happen really quickly. Now, a lot of work on epigenetics has been done on a kind of worm called nematodes. Nematodes are tiny worms, and you can follow these epigenetic effects for 14 generations. Because in those 14 generations, in a nematode, it takes less than 2 months to get to 14 generations. And so when I was writing about this, Daniel writes in, um, imagine the headache of organizing a family reunion every 10 days. Because with the nematode, you have several generations every 10 days. And so between him and I, and his humor and his skill and his capacity to translate my ideas, but also to handle my emotional ups and downs, we really came to a working relationship. And so in entering this workshop, it feels very different for me this time. In that almost every time, I would say every time before we did this, I was always worried about how my son will show up and how will I have to correct his faux pas and his missteps and his mistakes. I have no such worry now. I'm just looking forward to working with him and allowing whatever happens to happen. So to end my conversation here, um, believe me, if you see that first workshop that we did in 2016, and if you see that talk and you see the tension there, I can tell you it was pretty heavy going at times, then and since. And it seems to have transformed. And I'm telling you, if we can do it, you can do it. Because for all my reputation as somebody who can bestow knowledge and wisdom and insight and understanding, it doesn't mean that when it comes to myself, I can manifest those qualities. And I'm telling you, if we can work it out, then anybody who's watching can work it out. Now, why do I say when anybody who's watching? Because anybody who's watching is already committed to transformation. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. If you didn't believe in the need, if you didn't have the love and the interest in working this through, and if you didn't have at least some belief that it's possible, you wouldn't be here. So I'm telling you, if we can get as far as we have, and I think we have further to go yet, and getting to know each other even more intimately, I think. But if we can do it, I guarantee you, you can do it. So thank you. And with that, I'll pass it on to my co-author, Daniel.
Thanks, Dad. I really enjoyed that. Can everyone hear me okay? Moderators, Laurel, yeah? Okay, excellent. Oh, Laurel's got some emoji action going on, fancy. I've got some notes here, so I'll just, well, yeah, so Gabor mentioned the, how, parent-child issues go back all the way to the Old Testament. They also obviously show up in the New Testament. I mean, Jesus had some issues with his father. And it actually turns out that they go even to the what I would call the next testament, or the future testament. Here's a quote. I was watching an episode of a favorite show of mine last night, and you'll be able to tell what show it is by the end of it. There's a quote: "Father and son, both proud, both stubborn, more alike than either of them were prepared to admit. A lifetime spent building emotional barriers. They're very difficult to break down. And now the time has come, it's too late. It's a difficult moment. It's a lonely one. It's a moment Spock is about to face." And it's from a Star Trek The Next Generation episode called Reunification, in which Leonard Nimoy guests as Spock, and his father Sarek is dying. And it's actually a beautiful plot line, because as Vulcans, they don't express emotion, and they actually explicitly, it's said that Vulcans deliberately suppress their emotions or repress them as And that's just how they are able to achieve such heights of logic. But Sarek develops a debilitative condition called Bendai syndrome, where he can no longer control his emotions. And Picard, who's the one who says that quote, has at one point mind melded with Sarek, so he was able to telepathically experience all the love that Sarek feels for his son Spock and all of the turmoil that's been in there. And that moved me to tears when I saw it recently. And like Gabor just said, unlike what Picard said, it's never too late. In a sense, if, you know, we were playing the song The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics when you guys came into the room, and there's a line in there, it's too late when we die to admit we don't see eye to eye. Now, and in a sense, that's true. I mean, life is finite. And in another sense, we've had people in this workshop who are there to confront and transform their relationship with a no longer alive ancestor or parent. And that's a function of the fact that much of the relationship, I estimate somewhere around 80%, is not interpersonal, but it's intrapersonal. It happens within each of us, and then we relate to the other. But, you know, just like vision, if I'm looking at this computer, yeah, there's a computer there, but the computer I'm seeing is happening inside my brain, inside my optic nerve, inside my occipital lobe, all that. And relationships are like that too. And we forget that. We get fixated on the person over there. And the problem with that is they're not changing. They can't be changed. Maybe they'll change of their own accord. But what's going on inside of us is what is actually very malleable if we start to look at it, if we press pause. So yeah, I echo everything Gabor said. It's also different for me this year. As you said, Dad, I don't have a chip on my shoulder this year. So I'm, you know, and that does have a lot to do with the fact that we've been working together so successfully and working these things out. And working them out for a higher purpose too, not working them out to work on our relationship, which I think can be a bit of a rabbit hole, but working them out for a purpose. We have a book to write. We have a workshop to lead. It's not about us. It's not about feeling good about ourselves. It's not about some abstract, heroic narrative of, you know, redemption or something. It's about something more important, just like, you know, a healthy parent-child relationship happens inside of living life together and doing things. You know, you go to the park together, you make a meal together, you know, you're not thinking about the relationship, you're relating. And that's been a really nice shift. And I can say more when we have our conversation about what that's been like for me. But yeah, there's this weird feeling of I'm not here to prove anything or to declare anything or to spin it any particular way. I don't feel like I need to have anything seen by the audience. Whereas, you know, in past years, I get up on stage and I have something to prove, especially with you sitting there across from me. Feels a little competitive. And this year, the Zoom helps, you know, but also just where we're at really helps. And so we have come a long way, I think. And I just wanted to share, I thought I would just share about some of the things I've learned, some of the principles of this thing. And my hope is that they generalize. I get a sense I'm not just speaking about myself. These seem to be more universal principles of this work. And I'm speaking from the adult child's point of view, because that's the only one I have to go on. So for the adult children who are listening, you know, I hope I can speak directly to you and map out the territory for you. And for the adults listening in, or the parents listening in, maybe this will give you some insight into the position that your adult child is in this work, and hopefully you find that helpful. So the first thing I've learned, and I suspected it from the start, but I thought it when we started this 5 years ago, but I was a little I didn't know how to feel about it. Maybe I felt guilty about it or defensive about it. But the playing field is not even. The playing field is not even or equal in this. And I think when I started, I was nervous that there would be this expectation that, okay, well, you know, you forgive me for this and I'll forgive you for that. And we have to somehow cosplay as two equals. And that if I don't do that, I'm being petulant or immature or childlike. And that didn't work. You know, I had stuff to get out of my system. I couldn't just assume a neutral, enlightened, okay, Father, it's time for us to mend and heal. You know, I had to start from where I was. And for the adult child in this situation, it's important to realize that the playing field is not equal. It's challenging for both. I'm not saying it's easy for the parents, but there's a structural thing built in. And I mentioned this before. When me and my father met, I didn't exist as a person. I was a blob of goo. I was a blob of, you know, neurons and barely formed nervous system and, you know, new neural connections being formed every second and with no self-awareness, and not even any bodily self-control, no sense of myself as a separate entity. I was formed, you know, as a creation, a byproduct of his genetic material and my mother's genetic material, and I was born into their environment over which I had zero control. And that's true for every single one of us. That's just baked into the situation. However, the parent was generally at least 18 years old, if not older, in some cases younger, you know, in some exigent circumstances, but still, that's a lot more put together as a person than a newborn infant is. And there is no other relationship that starts with that level of inequality. My father remembers meeting me. I do not remember meeting my father. I might remember the first time I became aware of my father as a person, but that was a gradual developmental process. So my memory is by definition going to be fuzzier, more inchoate. I also needed him at a particular point in a way that he never needed me, or he never should have needed. He never legitimately needed me. Sometimes parents project needs onto their kids, but that's not the same as an actual need. That is an echo of the parent's relationship with their own parent. It's got nothing to do with the child, but the child lives out that karma, right? Whatever's unresolved. But I genuinely did need him. And that's a matter of historical record. That's actually what happened. And trying to spiritually or intellectually or psychologically or therapeutically bypass that to say, well, okay, what's done is done, bygones be bygones, trying to skip to the end of the book where we sort of achieve even playing field, it doesn't work. It won't work for either of you. You have to start from where you're at. And where you're at is our backstory is one of radical inequality. And I don't mean that in like a political sense, as if it's unjust. It's not unjust. It is uneven. And I think that can get lost sometimes in this work, both because parents can lose sight of it sometimes because they have a different memory of their child's childhood than the child does. And whatever the parent's memory is, it's not the child's experience. And the child, now that I'm an adult, I feel this pressure or this, maybe I'm used to acting like an adult. So it's difficult to reconnect with the fact that in the background of this relationship, whatever's unsaid between us or unexcavated or undiscovered relates to a period when I was 100% helpless, 100% dependent on that person, and still developing. So I just want to say it's okay. In fact, it's mandatory to recognize that and to reckon with that contradiction going into this. You can't skip over it. And ultimately, the only way out of all of these conundrums is through. And a corollary to what I just said is that the adult child is going to have to develop and maintain and stay true to their own independent understanding of their past. I mean, part of what we do in the Hello Again workshop is to reframe the past in a way that's fruitful, and each person may be holding on to interpretations or blind spots about the past, which can include amnesiac blocks, not even remembering, that can be counterproductive in terms of having a present moment relationship. And what can be tempting is that because the parent remembers, the child being a child, is that the parent narrates the child's childhood to the child. And my parents did that to me a lot. They filled in a lot of the blanks ever since I was very young. Out of the best of intentions. I mean, they had a clear understanding that parents affect their kids and they had a certain memory. And they told me that as a kind of bedtime story, that this is how you came to be you. And it was only once, and it could only happen when I was ready for it or when life was ready for it, once I got my own version of my childhood and told them, you're not the authors of my life anymore. Only then could I start to have some real agency and say in the relationship now. There seemed to be a connection between really realizing that, again, not through any desire to manipulate me or gaslight me or deceive me, my parents absolutely just simply cannot know what my childhood was like, even if they know everything there is to know about childhood development, trauma, their own childhoods, and that it's absolutely 100% legitimate. In fact, it's required that I write my own story. And it's better that I write a story that's factually inaccurate than that I accept someone else's story that's based on facts. It would be better, because the factual inaccuracies would still be a metaphor for something true. So owning your own version, which may be very difficult, because again, one of the sway that parents have over children when we're young is that the parents are the gatekeepers of reality. They set the frame and the template for this is what's real. This is what's true. This is what's constant. This is what you can rely on. This is what you can't rely on. I'm hungry. No, you're not. He's mean. No, he's not. You're whining, in all kinds of little subtle ways. Parents just know more. And they have veto power over a child's experience. And that can get baked in. And so the adult child has to, one way or another, reclaim that authority. And the word authority and the word author have the same root, and as does the word authenticity. It's the ability to be the author of our own lives, the authority on our own experience that allows us to be authentic. Another thing I've learned is that, and this has been really one of the big turnarounds in growing up. And it's easy to say, and I think we hear it a lot, but to really embody it and get it all the way down takes time, I think. And that's that even though our parents continue to trigger us and to seemingly do the same things they did when we were kids, it seems like my parents are engaging in the same behavior I would have called manipulative or invalidating or maybe abusive or whatever it is. they're not doing it on purpose. And I'm seeing it the way I'm seeing it. The best way to look at it is that I'm getting clues about what my childhood was like. Not that there's something now to deal with, like, you guys need to stop doing this to me and whatever. I mean, we can do that. You can set boundaries. But, you know, the blow-ups I've had with my parents, the best way I've been able to deal with them, I mean, even if I win the argument, it just will happen again. You know, if I'm trying to be vindicated, it'll never happen, because vindication is the fantasy of a child. If I use my experience with my parents now as clues to, oh my God, this is what I must have gone through as a kid. Now I'm piecing the pieces back together. It's the scene of the crime. And I think it's okay to call it a crime. And it's not a malicious crime, but in terms of a violation against one's authenticity, the stresses we go through as kids, the indignities, the difficulties, in a sense, that's something gets violated, which is another word for that is trauma. And I'm not talking about malicious intent. And so as I have these difficult interactions with my father, the first job for me is to say, okay, wow, this is really familiar. Wow, as a kid, how must I have experienced this sort of situation? Okay. And now I can speak for my inner child instead of speaking from it. When I approach my father to address the current situation, I can come from the knowledge that I have a lifetime of experience dealing with this kind of upset or dealing with this whatever, but not be caught in it, not doing the time warp again, to quote the song, you know? Not being caught in a time vortex, acting like I'm still a 2-year-old in that stuck kind of way. And being aware, okay, yeah, I need these cues, I need these clues. I'm being clued in. I'm getting information to unravel the mystery of what happened between us and what happened inside of me. And the more I figure that out, the more I'm going to be able to see the person over there as he is or she is now, which is very, very difficult. As Gabor said, he quoted Elena Ferrante, is it possible that we carry our parents inside of ourselves? Well, how am I supposed to carry you inside of me and deal with you out there at the same time with any kind of coherence? It's bad enough we carry our parents inside of us, you know, after they're gone, but what about when they're still here and we're dealing with them? So I'm carrying some version of you inside of me, and I'm dealing with you in the present. And I guess one last thing. Yeah, this stuff I can save for later. The last thing I'll say is, and I've learned this over and over again, you don't know what's possible, and you don't know what's coming next. It's enough to know that something is possible or that it might be possible. Just that curiosity, that openness, that maybe it ain't necessarily so, however it seems. But whatever your expectations are of how this is going to go, your fantasy, like Gabor said, it's not going to go that way. And if it does, it'll be different than you expect. And you don't know what route you're going to take to get wherever you're going. So the best you can do is just try to be true to the process and learn what you learn as you go. And it's very rewarding. It's very difficult. Whoever's here is not in, you're not here because you're looking for a good time. I know that about you. You're here because something to you is more important than the status quo. And there's something you're longing for, and you deserve it. And as with all genuine longings, I actually think it's something's calling to you, something real is calling to you, some real possibility is calling to you. And now you get to either alone or together find out what that is. So I'll leave it there. And I hope that was coherent.
So this is where you and I get to have a conversation for a while, and then we turn it over to the audience.
Correct. I'm just going to grab something to drink.
Thank you, Daniel. There's one thing I wanted to say, but I didn't, is that these workshops I facilitate, they're very much necessarily arising out of our own experience. But I have two other children, and Daniel has another parent. And what we mustn't assume is that like each relationship with each of my children has its own joys and its own challenges and its own qualities. So it's not that there isn't any overlap, but that it is unique in each case. And it's really important that we make that differentiation so that I don't bring the same consciousness, the same ideology into my relationship with my daughter or with my other son, Daniel's younger siblings, than I do with Daniel.
Well, hopefully you don't bring any ideology, because what is an ideology?
Well, the point is that we do.
Yeah,
And,
but what's the definition of an ideology? It's worth unpacking, I think.
well, what would you like to say about that?
Well, I'm asking. This is a conversation. This is a dialectic. How would you define an ideology?
It's a set of beliefs, some of which are conscious, but much of it is unconscious, that is fixed, and you mistake it for reality. That's
Yes,
what it really is.
and it also has a lot to do with how things should be,
Yeah.
how things ought to be, which can be confused with imagination or possibility. I said this last year, that when we get fixated on one fantasy of how it's supposed to be, our imagination gets arrested. It's supposed to be a fluid thing, but it gets stuck on one frame.
Yeah.
And then we're constantly frustrated because life is not going to line up with that. And further to what you said, one important thing for me, especially this year, has been being really clear that there's something called the parental unit.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone grows up with it, right? Because some people grow up with single parents or whatever. But for those of us who do grow up with, multiple or two parental figures, you have your mom, or you have one parent, you have the other parent, and then sometimes you have the parental unit to deal with when they appear as a united front. That certainly was my experience. And part of growing into an adult child is realizing, you know what? I'm happy for you guys to have your relationship, but I don't want to have a relationship with your relationship. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to have a relationship with mom, but not to confuse and to sort of insist on that boundary, that sometimes there can be, at least in our family, a tendency to sort of go back to a kind of triangulated, the three of us talking together about something. And just one of the boundaries I've set up is, I kind of just want to talk to one of you at a time. It kind of just works better that way.
So I want to go back to something that you said, and I want to ask you about it. You were talking about this uneven field. Something in me rankled at that.
Okay.
Because although the history that you recount in terms of how we meet and how uneven it is totally true.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to create the impression personally for people entering this workshop that it's still uneven. Because let me talk here.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
Because ultimately it'll be a little bit too easy for the adult child to hide behind that.
Yes.
It's not on uneven ground, and you have more power than I do. Well, actually, is that really true? Like, at what point do we come to the juncture where we can actually take responsibility? So you talk about triggers, being triggered by your parents, and in my teaching, I really pay attention to words. And one of the words is trigger. Now, what is a trigger? If you look at
It's the smallest part of a firearm.
it's a small
that sets it off.
So there's ammunition, there's explosive material, and there's a whole mechanism for delivering that. Then there's a little trigger. And in our world, and if you get triggered, if somebody gets triggered, you're triggering me. It's a real complaint in today's world that I'm being triggered. Trigger warning.
Watch out! Watch out! You're starting to sound like Jordan Peterson.
Well, he's not.
He's not entirely wrong on that one.
He might be 99% off base, but he's not 100% off. That's another subject. But what would you rather pay attention to? That small little thing called the trigger?
Mm-hmm.
Or look at the ammunition and the explosive, and that's you. So in terms of learning, it's far more interesting to look at yourself and what's being triggered than to worry about the trigger.
Yes.
So in that sense of responsibility for looking at oneself, I think it's very much an even playing field.
Got it.
So I want to know what your comment on that is.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like when I said it's not an equal playing field, something got triggered for you. And you interpreted a particular way that correlates with that being triggered, which is that you thought I was talking about an uneven distribution of responsibility now.
All right, so that's what I'm asking you about. So where does responsibility come in?
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
What are the implications for this kind of work?
Right, very good. That's very important. I mean, what I said was provocative, and it's important to understand it in the right way. I don't mean that the way to approach this is that the onus is on the parent. In fact, the onus is going to be in some ways more on the adult child. In certain ways, there are certain, when I say it's uneven, there are different roles. There are different kinds of work that each is going to have to do. You're different. You come to this differently. And when I say uneven, it may not be like necessarily tilted, but it's bumpy. It's not a straight, it's not, you and mom working on your relationship are two co-equal. It's qualitatively different than any other relationship. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
In its origin story, right? And in its challenges and in what the trajectory is.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just talking about acknowledging that, not as one person's on the hook and the other one's not on the hook. But adult children are dealing with something that the parent is not dealing with in doing this. Parents are dealing with something the child isn't dealing with. But, I wasn't there when you were a kid. You were there when I was a kid. That's a fact of our relationship. And if we don't acknowledge it, I'm not saying I get to use it against you.
Okay.
I'm not saying I get, and which is what you're hearing, clearly. That's what you hear, that it's going to be leveraged against you or something. And I can understand why you might think that based on how it's been in the past.
That's not what I actually heard. What I actually heard was some version that there's more responsibility on one side than the other. That's what I actually heard.
No.
Okay.
No, the relationship is, I don't even think the relationship is 50-50. It's 100-100.
Right.
Or it's 100 and however much you choose to take.
Right.
I'm going to do myself no favors by opting out of responsibility. I'm just setting myself up for things to stay exactly the same. That was true when I was a kid. I had no responsibility for how things were, but that's part of the, again, that's part of the unevenness. You've always been responsible. I haven't. So it's a new skill for me to show up as a responsible creature in this relationship.
Well, yeah.
It's different trajectories, different plot arcs for both of us. We're not coming at this from the same starting point. Where we want to end up is at something like parity, something like meeting each other on the same ground. But part of the way I think about it is that doing this work, you can't assume that when you start this work, you're dealing with two still fully developed people. In some ways, this work is completing whatever's incomplete in the job of, I mean, the adult child is going to have to do some work to complete whatever's incomplete in their own development to be able to show up with the parent.
But as you know very well, so will the parent.
Yes, but the parent, again, the parent's work involves going back to a childhood where, like, you completing your development means you going back to your relationship with Andor and Judy, your parents,
Yeah.
and your childhood, right? Whereas me completing my development involves simultaneously juggling Gabor Maté present and the Gabor Maté that I carry inside of myself and keeping them separate.
Yeah.
That's an incredibly difficult balancing act. And what I want is we don't get to use any of these facts. Like, just like parents don't get to use the fact that, oh, they were traumatized, there's multi-generational trauma, therefore, no one means to do any harm and the child shouldn't be, like, we don't get to use these facts against each other, but they are facts.
Okay.
And
now,
they're not equally distributed. There's unique things that each cohort has to deal with in a way that's true of no other relationship in the world.
okay, Daniel. So I'm just looking at the time here, and we're getting close to the end of our
Oh, wow.
time. Let me just pass the ball back to you for a minute. Was there anything in what I said that you want to talk to me or ask me about before we turn it over to the audience?
Well, I don't have any. Well,
you don't have to.
You talked about the book, and I spoke a little bit about what it's been like to have. It's been really helpful for me to have professional boundaries with you, because it helps. It's like scaffolding for me to say, okay, you talked about how I had to sometimes regulate my father's emotions and part of the great thing was I got to say, okay, part of that is my job. It's what I signed up for. It's what I'm being paid for. And then I get to decide at what point this is not my job.
Okay.
Which has been great. And I wonder, for you, what has the role of switching our relationship from just in the abstract father and son interpersonal family dynamics to a professional setting or some common project? How has that shifted the way you approach me, experience me? What opportunities has that given?
Well, what actually shifted, part of what shifted is precisely that distinction, that I'm not just dealing with my son here, I'm dealing with a co-worker.
Right.
Who has the right to set the same expectations and boundaries as any co-worker would.
Right.
And not to let the father-son dynamic, to the extent that it's still charged with old stuff, interfere with the professional relationship.
Right.
Which itself is liberating
to
make that distinction. Well, I think with that, we have an hour left, so we want to turn this over to the audience now. Laurel, we're going to have
a 5-minute break.
We're going to have 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let's take a moment just, at the end of this portion of the evening, just to thank Gabor and Daniel. We've still got lots more time with them, but I think if we all just want to send some gratitude their way.
Or maybe send some money our way or something.
Send some money. Actually, here's a really good segue. We can do another plug for, just another reminder that you can continue to work with Gabor and Daniel at their workshop next weekend. There are still some spots left. So that's one way to send money Gabor and Daniel's way. So folks, you heard right. We're going into a little break. We just want to give you a moment to nourish your bodies, to take care of your needs. All right. I think I've got everything here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to message Katja or myself, and we'll get right into our Q&A. And so, Linda.
Laura, before you do.
Yes, Gabor.
I just want to say something about the process. So
please, thank you.
Sometimes when people ask a question, as Laurel just said, we may want to speak with you. And we may want to come back with you with the question. That's an invitation. You don't have to accept it. We'll totally respect your desire just to be answered without being questioned. But you'll find that being questioned is a very helpful way of you finding deeper answers within yourself. So every time I respond with a question, that's an invitation that you're welcome to accept, and you're equally welcome not to accept, just so that you know. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that invitation and that clarification, Gabor. All right, Linda and Vinny, you had a question. I'm wondering if you're here and if you can take yourself off mute and we'll bring you up on stage.
Hi. Thank you for having us. It's such an honor. We're actually in the middle of having dinner too. So do you want me to repeat our question?
Yes, please.
Please.
We haven't received it yet, so we'd love to hear it.
Okay. So the question was, how can we find even ground where when we both have anxiety, however, one of us is explosive and one of us completely just shuts down? And that the cycle continues, like in all of our interactions. Even actually just before this this event started, we had a little bit of a, I don't know, not an argument, but you know, one of our things. So
Perfect timing.
yeah.
Well done. Can you remind us of your names?
I'm Linda.
I'm Vinny.
Linda and Vinny. Vinny, how old are you?
18.
You know what I'm asking? Okay, great.
So let me just make sure I hear the question, which is that you each have different ways of responding to emotional triggers. One of you becomes explosive, by which I imagine you start blurting out things or saying things or raise your tone of voice or have kind of aggressive body language perhaps. And the other shuts down so that you become silent, you withdraw, you kind of freeze. And so how can you possibly work your way through that kind of a dynamic? Is that the question?
Yes.
Thank you. So here's the thing. First of all, thank you for asking the question. The answer is you can't work your way through that. Okay? Don't even try to. Okay? However, acknowledge each of you. I am triggered right now. I'm in no state to engage in rational conversation. And I'm triggered not because you made me triggered, but because that's my dynamic. My defense mechanism, Linda, you might say, is to go on the attack and become explosive.
Are you sure that's who?
Yeah, I think that's how they identify themselves. Yes. Okay. And Vinny, my defense mechanism is to kind of shut down, is to freeze. Now I got news for you. Neither of you are doing this. Vinny, it's not like you say to yourself, I'm going to decide to shut down and freeze right now and to become silent and defensive and withdraw. The nervous system does it automatically. And you don't decide, you don't make a conscious decision, hey, I'm going to explode right now and I'm going to spew my volcanic lava all over you. You don't make that decision either, do you?
No.
It happens spontaneously.
But let me just interject. It sure looks like the other one's doing it on purpose, right?
Yeah, it may look
Yes.
like
it. Sure looks like it.
Yeah.
It really, for all the world, looks like the person's choosing the very approach that's guaranteed to piss you off and disarm you and render you unable to continue in this conversation, right? It's kind of, it looks diabolical.
Yeah.
That's also worth noticing.
But it isn't, okay? So what's happening in each case is each of your nervous system is wired to respond to a perceived threat in a certain way. So it's your autonomic nervous system, the part of your nervous system, and the part of your brain that's not under your conscious control. Neither of you are doing this. And so therefore, in that context, there's no working out of anything. However, here's what you could do. And see if you can just practice doing this. Boy, I'm feeling myself triggered. I'm moving into shutdown. Or boy, I feel myself triggered. I'm moving into explosion. And then say, thank you. Let's talk some other time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you each, should you choose to take it on, could work with people to help you regulate yourself. Because what's happening, neither of you are self-regulated. It's your autonomic nervous system, unconscious parts of your brain taking over. And you could each work, not with each other. This is self-work. How can I deal with this automatic dynamic inside myself that makes me explode or makes me shut down? So just to reiterate, don't try and work through this when it's happening, but acknowledge and recognize that it's happening. Don't be ashamed of it because you're not doing it. It's your programming. And, you know, if Vinny has developed this tendency to shut down, and I can understand that because that's part of my mechanism, is to shut down and withdraw. There's good reasons for it. That sometimes in your early childhood, this is how you survived, Vinny. There must have been a lot of explosions around you, and you must have at some point developed this tendency to shut down just to protect yourself. And same with you, Linda. In your childhood, there would have been events that you would have learned to respond to by explosion. It's not conscious, it's not deliberate, it's not meant to hurt the other person, it's automatic. So just recognize it when it happens and acknowledge it. And then say, okay, this is not a time to talk. And then also, each of you might want to do some work to help you regulate yourself so that you're not governed so automatically by reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Yes.
May I add a thing or two?
I'd just like to hear Vinny's answer as well.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Okay. Did you?
Didn't mean to shut you down, Vinny.
Yes, your question.
Yeah, the question is, did what we have to say here make some sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Daniel.
Yeah. Two other things. Hopping on what Gabor said about it, you're not doing it. How often does it happen that when these things happen, you go away and you feel bad about it? You feel ashamed about it. Why did I do that? What's that?
Right now?
Right. So the shame is there too, right?
Right now, yes.
Yeah. Vinny, does that exist for you? Like as the shutdown one, it may be a little harder for you to feel what's going on inside because it's kind of like a wet blanket, right, on the feelings. But do you relate to that, feeling some shame or some guilt or embarrassment?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Like you wish you could be some other way with your mom. Like, why does she push my buttons like this? I'm not like this with my friends. You know, I know that for me, I'm like, I still feel like a fucking little kid. I don't want to feel like a little kid. I'm 18. I mean, or in my case, I'm 45. Imagine what it's like over here. So that Gabor gave you some advice about what to do in the moment. I'm going to give you some advice about what to do after the fact. Instead of saying, this may be a little before your time, Vinny, but you know, instead of quoting Britney Spears, "Oops, I did it again," you can just say, "Oh, well, that happened. That happened. That weather pattern happened again between us, inside me. Interesting." And the more you can do that, see that the shame shuts you down even more and sets you up for it to happen again because you're resisting it. And your system doesn't get to digest it and get the nutrients and get the lessons. These events are actually not in themselves a big deal. They feel really shitty. But all they are is just like Gabor said, reverberations, ripples of a stone that got thrown in the lake a long time ago. So if you can find a way to zoom out when you feel that shame, be like, oh, there's the shame again. Geez, this feels terrible. That happened. Not, why do I do this?
Well,
and then you could ask the genuine question, why do I do this? Why is this the case inside my nervous system? Why might that be? And you're each going to have to answer that for yourselves. Now, just one last thing, going back to what I said about the unequal playing field. And this is just worth noticing. There's nothing to be guilty about. It doesn't mean one of you is more responsible than the other. But Vinny, who was around when you first experienced explosions, when your nervous system might have learned to shut down in the face of explosions? Who was there?
My mom.
Yeah, this person right here. Now, in a different, you know that every 7 years, every cell in the human body replaces itself. So it's literally not the same person. But it sure as hell looks like the same person. It sounds like the same person. So you could be, and do you guys still live together?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're living in your house. So you could be forgiven for confusing that person with the person, right? So that's something for you to deal with. And Linda, when you first felt the stress, the threat that makes you explode, was Vinny there?
No.
No, it's got nothing to do with him, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the source for each of you will look differently. For Vinny, it's going to be reminding yourself, I'm not the same person as I was then. This is what happened to me then is not happening to me now. It's an echo, it's a reminder. And my mom's not doing it on purpose. For you, Linda, it's, I am hallucinating. I am seeing, like my son is a projector screen. Sorry, it's like my son is a projector screen and I'm the projector and I'm projecting this documentary film, this sad documentary film taken a long time ago from before he was born. So for each of you, it's about snapping out of a kind of daydream, a time warp. And it's just different for each one because Linda, you did happen to be there when Vinny first, right?
Yeah.
And it's not going to help for you to be guilty about that. Your guilt will not help him. Your shame will not help empower him, will not help free him, because no one wants to be their parents' mistake. No one wants to be their parents' fault.
and there's nothing to be ashamed about because you're not doing it, okay? And you're certainly not doing it on purpose.
No.
Believe me, we've been through this. Okay, Laurel, next question.
Thank you both.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Linda and Vinny. Thank you for your courage in coming up here. All right. Ali, are you willing to come up and share your question? I'll invite you to unmute yourself and come on up to the virtual stage.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ali.
Okay. So
we get Ali's video up there. I'm still seeing that. Vinny, maybe you're working on that. I just want to wait until I can see you, Ali.
So unfortunately, I can't turn on my camera.
Okay.
So, yes. So I feel like there is a lot of anger and resentment towards my father, and I feel like this makes me shut down or push him away, and just it's a defense. I entered some defense mode when I'm around him, and I feel this stands in the way of things getting better. And I feel that this anger, resentment can't be healed or until it's acknowledged by him in some way. And it's and I feel like telling him this anger, resentment is just too painful for him to. I think so. I never told him everything that I want to say. So, and I feel this stays in me, this anger and resentment, and it gets in the way. So maybe any insights on dealing with that?
Great question. Dad, can I take this one first?
You can take it, but can you summarize it for me though? Because I had
Yeah. So Ali is speaking about a deep-seated anger and resentment towards his father that he is, which he sees gets in the way of an authentic or you know, a maximal relationship with his father. It gets in the way.
Okay.
It imposes constraints. He feels no ability to discharge it because his father, in his experience, is unable to hear it when he tries to express it. So he's never expressed it fully, which kind of impacts it further and keeps it moving, right? So Ali, I'll just speak from my own experience and just see how it lands for you. And Gabor may have some questions for you too. There's something I've been thinking about. I call it going back to the well. You know the expression of going back to the well over and over again, even after the well is dry?
And no, can you explain maybe?
Yeah, so it's like I'm thirsty, and there's a well in the ground that used to have water or should have water. I expect it. Maybe I found water there once and I satisfied my thirst. So I go to the well to try and satisfy my thirst, to quench my thirst. It's very uncomfortable to be thirsty like that. I can't function if I'm dehydrated like that. I go to the well and there's no water. And I go home disappointed. And maybe I go find some water somewhere else, but it's not as good. And then the next day I'm thirsty again and I go back to the same well and there's no water. And I keep doing that over and over again, going back to the well over and over again, expecting to find the water there. Does that make sense as a metaphor?
Yes, but I think I'm not completely sure that he can take it, but I'm too afraid to say things. I'm afraid to hurt him too much. But maybe he can take it. Yes.
No, I got that. First of all, it's true. What you're saying is true. You don't know what he can take. You don't actually know. You have some ideas about it, and you have some experience that corroborates those ideas. I'm here to tell you that you're trying to satisfy some need of yours to be heard, to be understood. And you have a theory, you have an idea or belief that until your father can give you something, you won't be able to be at rest. You won't be able to fully love him or have the relationship with him that you want to have. Is that correct?
Yes, true.
It may help to get used to the idea that you may be right. He may never be able to give you what you think you're looking for. So how do you imagine that conversation going, that ideal conversation where you say everything to him? You tell him your anger, you fully express it. What does he say in return in your fantasy that would make everything better?
I think he just says, okay, I see that that's true, that happened, but it wasn't on purpose or something like that. Yes.
Does he apologize?
Not necessarily, no.
But he just hears you fully.
Yes.
Okay. So that may happen, Ali, in your lifetime, and it may never happen. Can we get real about that? We don't know if that's possible. And so it's up to you whether you're going to hinge your peace of mind or your relationship with your father on something happening that may or may not happen. Now, one thing I know is that I wanted that from my parents for a long time. And all of my attempts to get it backfired.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted my father to see me as an equal. That's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted him to see me as a man. And one of the most beautiful and helpful things my dad ever said to me a few years ago was when I said, Dad, when are you going to finally treat me like your equal? When do I get to be your equal? And he said to me, Daniel, I can't make you my equal.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said that, I felt like I'd been stabbed in the heart, because what I heard was, Daniel, you will never be my equal. I will always be superior to you. But then in the next moment, he said, Daniel, I also can never make you not my equal. Only you can do that. And what he was pointing to is that I still had a perception of myself as small, helpless, and weak. I was still stuck in the past. And so when I came to him, came back to the well over and over again, looking for that thing that I thought would satisfy me, I was coming to him as a child, asking him for something he can't give me, which is to reverse the past. And it was only after I started to give myself what I was looking for. And in your case, it might be understanding. It might be compassion. It might be a full reckoning with what happened. And finding whatever peace you can find inside yourself. Once you can come to your father from a place of peace and not make your relationship conditional on him reacting a certain way, you may find that he has more room to listen, to hear you. Parents can be very defended against their own guilt. And whenever I would come to my parents in a way that had that edge, I would see them both just shut down and they wouldn't be able to hear me. And of course, I would use that as more evidence that they don't want to hear me. But that wasn't the case. And this is where the 100% responsibility of the adult child comes in. And part of that involves accepting the fact that you cannot control him, you can't manipulate him, and you can't control the future. You cannot ensure that he will ever hear you. And so you better not make your peace of mind contingent on that thing.
So I'd like to add a few things here as well. If you could lay down.
I'm done.
Yeah. One is, Ali, that I don't know whether you're planning to participate in this workshop next weekend, but I promise you that by the end of the workshop, you could have worked this through.
Yes, I'm planning to participate. Yeah.
Okay, good. So then we look forward to working with you. Number one. Number two, have you ever written down just for yourself everything you wanted to say to your father?
Parts of that, yes. I write occasionally.
Have you done it completely?
No.
Let me suggest to you that between now and next week, you write down everything. Don't censor yourself. Don't hold anything back. Don't try to be nice. Fully express your hurt, your pain, your rage, your complaint, your grievance, whatever is in you. Put it down on paper. Do it in writing, not on a computer, but in writing in hand. Write a few pages, whatever you need to write, but get it out of yourself. Write it out, okay? So do that self-expression. That's the second point. The third point is, how's your father's hearing?
So a lot of times what happens when I try to say something like that, it backfires at guilting me.
I'm just asking, how's his hearing? Can he hear things? How are his ears?
Are you asking how he responds to?
No, Gabor's taking you through a little game. What?
I'm asking, how's his hearing? Can he hear okay?
Okay. Yes, he hears. Yes.
Okay, because I got hearing aids, you see. So if I took out my hearing aids, I wouldn't hear so well. Okay.
Okay.
Now, can you imagine for a minute, just for a minute, imagine that your father's deaf, okay? He's deaf. His ears don't work. He can't hear sounds, okay? If you spoke to your father and you knew that he was completely deaf, would you be angry with him if he couldn't hear you?
No, no.
Well, let me suggest that it may be in some ways your father is deaf. And I don't mean physically deaf, but emotionally deaf.
Mm.
Maybe something happened to him when he was a child that the only way he could survive it is to become deaf.
Mm.
Maybe he was attacked so much that as soon as he hears any kind of criticism, he goes deaf. So
Mhm.
I'm not trying to take him off the hook. I'm just saying consider the possibility that in some ways he's deaf.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, you may never get through to him. And the question for you is, if you never get through to him, are you going to be his prisoner for the rest of your life?
Mhm.
Are you going to be limited by your father's capacity to hear? Or do you want to be free, regardless of what your father can do or your father cannot do?
Mhm.
Now, which would you rather be, free, or would you rather be his prisoner?
No, I would rather be free, of course. Yeah.
Let me leave it at that. But that's the task that's the challenge that I'm going to suggest that you take on and see if we can make you free. I believe that if you become free, you'll be able to speak to him in a way that he can hear you.
Mhm.
I believe that. That, like Daniel said, that may or may not happen. Okay?
Mm.
Some people
Okay.
decide that the only way to be free is to not be in relationship with that parent. Some people decide that.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
theoretically could. If you don't, it's because something's important enough to you to try and find a solution, a way forward through this and within the relationship.
Mhm.
That is to not sacrifice, because that would be a kind of pseudo freedom, because that wouldn't accord with your heart. You love this man, you want to be, and it may be that you have certain needs or conditions that need to be fulfilled to have a relationship, but right now you can't see what they are. And so
Mhm.
expressing that, as Gabor suggested, hearing yourself fully has to precede, has to come before him hearing you. And I'm not sure that you've fully heard your own complaint fully. You're waiting for him to give it to you.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
how old are you?
23.
Okay, great. Well, it's starting to be time that you shift the balance of responsibility for that over to yourself, if you choose.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Ali, is that okay for you for now? For now?
Yes. Thanks very much, Daniel and Gabor. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. All right, we've had a couple of questions come in about folks who have parents who have passed away or who are aging. I wonder, Mariko, are you here to ask your question in your own voice?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll bring you up on stage.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. I did relate to what you were just talking to Ali about. But my challenge has been, I have a lot of awareness. I am working personally with somatic experiencing, healing my childhood trauma.
Yeah.
But I have chosen consciously to move back in with my elderly mother who is going through probably BPD and dementia. And with this deep understanding or yearning to heal whatever we can before she passes, because I know that we can heal even if she does pass, but the opportunity is great now. I am consciously aware though too that she does not really have the ability or the capability, or didn't used to. She's not that open to all this work. She keeps telling me to go do things, but isn't really that open to it. So in what suggestions do you have to me of how to heal on my own, or how to interact, how to clear this relationship? Because I do recognize that I keep recreating that relationship in my intimate partnerships. And I would really like to heal that and not pass it along.
Okay, so what's it like for you to be around your mother?
It's challenging, especially when she has her BPD outbursts.
BPD,
Borderline personality disorder. She can have, for no apparent reason to me, the aunt walks across the plate, she'll have an explosion. So it brings up childhood trauma again for me.
Let me interrupt, Mariko, listen to me.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt, okay?
Yes.
You give me an analysis. I'm not interested
Yes.
in analysis. I'm interested in what's it like for you to be around your mother. That's what I'm asking you. What does it feel?
It feels, I feel like I'm constantly on edge, not sure when something will scare me. So there's fear in my body. I'm not totally relaxed.
You experience fear, okay.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
I notice I suppress all of my emotions. I feel there's no space for it. So it's really hard to express myself. So I feel like I'm bottled up inside of my anger, my sadness.
You're experiencing anger, you're experiencing sadness.
Yes.
But bottled up.
Bottled up, unexpressed, yeah.
Yeah, like a pressure cooker.
Anything else?
Yes, pressure cooker, exactly the image that I've been playing with. I guess, I mean, the worst is this kind of walking on eggshells, this uncertainty, this fear of really just showing up, showing myself, not.
Got it. All right.
Sounds like vigilant and alert and tense.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that your mother may not be in any kind of condition to work on her share of this problem.
Yes.
Can you accept that she's not in a condition to work on it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So when was the first time that you found yourself walking around eggshells and bottling up fear and sadness inside you?
Probably as a young child, 2, 3 years old, because she wasn't able to share my fears or frustrations.
Yeah. She was too threatened by them.
Yes. Yeah. And so telling me kind of to cheer me up or push it aside or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're really saying is that when you're around your mother right now, you feel just like you did when you were 2 years old.
Yeah.
So the only question for you is, can you accept that that's how you feel? That that when you're on your mother, your 2 or 3 year old shows up.
Mm-hmm.
You got to start by accepting that that's how it is.
Yeah.
That's how it is right now.
That's how it is right now. It doesn't need to be that way, but that's how it is right now.
Right.
So how do you feel towards those feelings, that sadness and the anger and the bottling up? And I mean, how do you feel about having all that inside you?
I would love to find a way to release it. And I've been
I'm asking you how you feel about them.
How I feel about it. I am frustrated that it's bottled up.
Okay, so you're frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In other words, so you're rejecting those feelings. You don't want them to be there, right?
Well, I'd like to really feel them, and
you do feel them.
No, you don't, because you could just feel the frustration and the bottled upness, but you don't want to feel that.
The point is, you don't want to feel them. That's the whole problem.
That's what there is to feel.
You do feel them, don't you?
Well, I get around people that I feel very safe with.
That's fine.
And I still have just a tear trickling down, and I feel like there's so much sadness bottled up that wants to come out. But I just, there's so much fear that it's not,
that's
scary to let it out.
That's an analysis again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only asking, aren't your mother,
mm-hmm.
talking about your mom now.
Yes.
You're experiencing this fear, this bottled up sadness, this bottled up anger. How do you feel about all that? What I hear you saying is you're frustrated around it.
Yeah, that I can't.
Which means you don't want it to be there. If you could accept that they're there, you wouldn't be frustrated.
I'd like them to be seen. I'd like to
Seen by whom? Seen by whom?
I'm just trying to even give myself the space to have my emotions, and
okay, well, that I'm still asking you
it's
again.
not coming out.
Well, wait a minute. This idea that these emotions somehow need to be expressed and pushed out of yourself and so on. That's not what needs to happen. When you were a child, what do you wish your mother had been able to do for you? When you felt angry, what did you wish what do you imagine you wish your mother could have done for you?
To see that anger and to hold the space for me to have it.
And
So
not to be frustrated about it, right?
Right. Yeah. So just, okay, have your tantrum. Wow, this is really frustrating. I see it, just, it's okay to have it. It's safe.
Follow-up question.
Okay, let me just go on here.
No, but this is important. And it's just a small interjection. It's not going to disrupt the flow at all, I promise.
Yeah.
Very much to the point. Let's say there you were as a child and you were having a hard time figuring out what you were feeling or expressing your emotion. What would you have wanted from your mother in those moments when something was bottled up?
For her to see, so to hold that space, so kind of to kneel down and just, I see you, wow, there's something going on, what's going on, it's okay for you to have whatever, and you're safe, you're, even if you're confused, it's okay. Right. And not shut it down
with no pressure to make it come out, right?
Right. Yeah. Just it's okay that you are just doing whatever you're doing, right, as it is. Yeah.
Excellent. Back to you, Dad.
When you had sadness, what do you wish your mother had been able to do for you?
Hold that space too. So kind of allow me to cry, or hold me, or even if it's not holding physically, but just standing back and just allowing me to cry instead of trying to.
In other words, you wish that your mother had not been threatened by your emotions, right?
Yes. Right.
That she wasn't frustrated by them.
Right.
She wasn't limited by them.
Yeah.
That's what you wish. I'm telling you now, that's what you have to deliver to yourself. It's not, don't make a story out of it. When the sadness around your mother comes out for you, your mother's dementia and her unavailability is going to trigger every childhood memory you've ever had. The difference is you're not that child anymore.
Right.
You can give yourself that acceptance. So my suggestion to you is, and I'm going to finish with this now, is that you work not on how to express anything, but how to hold those emotions within yourself and to recognize them and not be frustrated by them.
Yeah.
That's where the work is. And when you, by the way, when you no longer approach your mother with this frustration that you're carrying, if that's possible for you, she'll become much sweeter.
Yes.
You may have already have noticed.
Yeah.
That sometimes she can be very sweet, even now.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Well,
the more I consciously work with it, yes, I see changes in her too. Not with expecting her to change, but just because I'm changing.
And the reason is that she's moving into a very childlike state.
Yeah.
Which means she's very sensitive to the energies around her. So when she's present to your frustration and whatever, she's going to respond to that. When you work it through with yourself, when you accept yourself and you allow those feelings to be there, really with compassion for yourself. It's a different energy that
Yeah.
your mother will sense radiating towards her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you owe that to her. I'm just predicting that that's how it'll go.
Right. And I do have compassion. I do understand where it came from. And I mean, similar to your background, she was born in Germany during the war, Second World War. And so I mean,
But who do you have compassion for?
I have an understanding for why she was the way she, or why she is. And so.
But that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm
No,
suggesting.
Yeah. I'm just saying, as I work on myself, I'm already understanding who she is. And so focusing on me now will potentially heal our relationship. Yeah.
The problem is that the part of you that understands is not the part of you that gets upset.
Yeah.
The part of you that gets upset doesn't understand.
Right. Yeah. The little 2-year-old doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the part of you that understands is trying to save the part that doesn't understand.
Yes.
So what you need
Which
here,
the other thing I wanted to say, which is that you're clearly psychologically developed. You're in a process. You're self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a hindrance because you go to what you know rather than what's actually going on.
Yes.
And it's compulsive, and it's a way of checking out from the less in control part. So just watch that tendency. Oh, there's my
right.
You know, my inner Jung to the rescue or whatever. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
thank you. I'm dealing with something now. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is for everybody. This is really great. Your example brings this. It's very important for all the adult children, and this will let the parents off the hook actually in a significant way. I think because you phrased it beautifully. You said something like, I'm trying to heal my inner child or heal my childhood, but how can I do that when my mother won't participate in this or isn't open to it, or isn't available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what that presumes? That's this is mental chiropractic. This is what I do with people. So you have a working theory. What's the working theory there? There's a connection you're making, a causal connection. What is it?
That I need her interaction with her, that I can't do it on my own, that
one has anything to do with the other, that you're healing.
Right.
I said to Ali, they actually have nothing to do with each other. Your relationship with your mother now and your healing of your childhood, they seem like they should fit into, well, you know, but in fact, that's the well we keep going back to until we got to get the message. It's dry. They can't do it for us, which is actually really good news.
Yes.
Then you can do the one and do the other and do them in conjunction with each other, but not sit in the waiting room of your healing, waiting to be led into a great relationship with your mother or vice versa.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Marco?
Yes, thank you. Very good points from both of you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Laurel?
Thank you. All right, I'm noticing the time. It's 8 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Do we have time for one more question, Gabor and Daniel? What do you think?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Nicole, I'll invite you up to the virtual stage.
There we go. I hear the point about acceptance, and I initially got that one wrong because then I thought I had to get my parents to accept things until I realized it's about me. And then the point about compassion, I think that was really helpful as a teaching too. And so here comes my question, which goes to, I'm quite conscious that I developed contrary to my father. So like a strong male energy. And so in reaction, I pushed against it, and also like much more from a male energy that kind of.
So Nicole, we're gonna ask you to cut to the question.
Yeah, that's the question. This point when your own identity has developed kind of in a way contrary to your parent, and that has, or at least that has so much defined the relationship with your parent. And in my case, it's my father. So I pushed against his male energy with a male energy in return, and it makes it hard to answer.
Nicole, time out. What I'm not hearing is a question mark. I'm hearing statements about male energy and about your childhood. So what do you want? Like, stop for a second, pause. Just take a pause, breathe if you can.
Can.
What is it you want to know in this
How
moment?
do you open that up? how do you how do you move from a relationship that has been so much defined in opposition to one where you can get to a much more open conversation even?
Let me ask you a question. It sounds like you're difficult to knowing who you are. If you're not in opposition to your father, then who are you?
I've worked on myself. I think I'm getting there, but it's really hard to, at least in my relationship with him, express that.
What is there to express?
Good point.
What's the problem? What's the problem? Get honest for a second. What's the problem?
That we actually don't have a good basis of talking to each other.
What is that?
Is your theory because you're so different? Is that why?
No, we're a lot alike.
Oh, I thought you developed in opposition to him.
Yeah, well.
Well, I think what I heard her say is that she developed all this male energy in pushing back against her father.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, what is that costing you?
A relationship with him.
What is that costing you?
Like what I'm looking for is an ability to honestly engage, because it's so much into pushed into forms.
What is it costing you not to have that?
You want an answer from what it is costing me inside of me.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Well, I think my contrary reaction to that could be I don't care, but I do care, because there is probably a void there.
If you told me you wouldn't care, I wouldn't believe you, because you wouldn't be in this conversation if you didn't care.
Yeah, so I guess there's a void.
So I'm still asking you, what is it costing you? I don't care is a defense against what it's really costing you.
Yeah.
So Nicole, I get that you're coming to us with the real issue in your life, okay? And you're very sincere in bringing it to us. So I'm asking you now, what is it costing you?
It's costing me connecting in a genuine way with my father.
That's
I feel a loss. I feel a loss and a void there.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere, okay? So when you say it's costing me a genuine connection, that's just an analysis. I'll say, what is it costing you not to have a genuine relationship with your father? What is that costing you?
And a way to express caring, a way to be heard, like that you also have.
And what is that costing you not to be able to do that?
To have a loving relationship, like to have an exchange of like love and caring that I know we both carry.
Okay, Nicole, so I'm going to ask you to just stop for a second. Are you okay, by the way, in this conversation? Or
Totally. I might cry, but it's okay.
That's all right. You're still with us. Okay. I want you to check in with your body right now, not your head. I'm going to ask you one more time. What's it costing you? And check in with your body now. Don't go up here and tell me another thing about
my heart. I feel it like really deeply in my heart.
Okay, so tell me, check in with your heart, please, right now, and tell us what you feel there.
A loss of connection, like a void, like
a void where connection should be.
Because we can't even go there,
Well, you don't believe you can go there.
Because of all the defense mechanisms that have been built up,
Okay, so the first thing is to really get what it's costing you. It's costing you a lot. There's a deep emptiness inside you. So these at least you believe that there is. You sense that there is. So these defense mechanisms that you've erected, that you've had to erect, I'm assuming, when you were growing up did help you survive, didn't they?
And they made me they made me who I am in many ways, how I push against things, you know.
Yeah, but they helped. But they were there for a reason, right?
Or it could have worked out differently. I think if this works out well, we actually can both creatively develop, you know, like in that relationship.
Yeah.
There was no hurt and no harm that came apart from.
Okay,
well,
yeah, but when you erected these defenses, I assume you didn't do it capriciously and just as a game. You must have erected them because you had good reason to. Is that the case?
Sure.
Okay. So the dilemma is you erected these defenses, but now they become a prison in a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's costing you a lot.
In how I define myself even, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, are you willing to do some work to, do you trust yourself enough? Are you strong enough now that you could survive with those defenses that have become a prison?
Oh yeah, no, I think in my life and where I live in North America, he lives in Austria, so that's helpful. I have that, you know, and I'm way more developing, like in an open way, like, and it wasn't even that a troubled relationship. I think it was this like contrariness and this like how it pushed me in my development and where I'm now.
Well, Nicole, we're going over time and we're getting back into analysis. Dad, can I step in to try and focus this?
Go ahead, yeah.
So I noticed, Nicole, that you have a lot of thoughts about this. You have a lot of ideas about it. You have a lot of theories about how it could be or how it should be and why it is that way. That's fine. You can have those. The only thing we'll just leave you with or suggest is this. I think you're completely right that those defense mechanisms have become a part of who you are. And it's not so easy to just disassemble your personality. And the thought of living without those, what you called your male pushback, contrary, because some of those have become strengths, right?
Sure.
You value those in your life. Do they help you in your work?
Sure.
Yeah. Do they help you in friendships? Do they help you in competitive arenas?
In friendships, not so much, but probably, yeah, in work.
So there are strengths and there are drawbacks. So what have I told you? That it's not so much about dropping them, it's about getting some flexibility with them and nurturing the other qualities in you that got suppressed at their expense. So it's not that you need to get rid of anything. It's about what can you get access to, what you can get in touch with. I mean, so if a masculine, if contrariness and pushback and argumentativeness, if those are masculine qualities, what qualities in you do you think are missing or malnourished or longing to be expressed that if they were present, it would make a difference?
Yeah.
What would those be?
Like to be more caring and like, I think first impression people will get is that I can be assertive and pushy, and it takes them a while longer to realize how caring I can also be, you know?
Right. So the softness, the caringness, the suppleness, the fluidity, the ability to go with the flow, the ability to accept, the nurturingness, the ability to nurture yourself. So when you're around your father, you're going to feel right now, you feel your limitations at their most extreme. You become the most polarized. You have to be that way because he's the whetstone against which you sculpted yourself. You know, you molded yourself, like you said, in reaction to him. And so the more that's going to be your work away from him. You're not going to be able to do this work in his presence. You'll be able to bring what you discover in yourself to that relationship as you do it, but do not expect that he's going to help you consciously.
I know.
That's going back to the well over and over again for something that isn't there, which doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It means you're going to have to retrain him how to see you. which means you're going to have to retrain yourself how to see yourself, get in touch with those lost parts of you that got buried underneath the fortress of your personality. And then you can have both. You can have your strength and you can have your softness. You can have your independent mindedness and you can have your suppleness.
And also you can decide when to use which side of you, so that it's not automatic, but you make a conscious decision. Okay.
Thank you. Cookstrom.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. I think this does bring us to the end.
Yes, it does. Thank you for being here, everyone. I may ask you a one-sentence question, Gabor and Daniel, as we go. What is one thing that brings you joy, that you cultivate joy with in your relationship together, just to end on a positive note?
For me,
I'd be positive if I could say something, but I'm not sure anything comes up for me. I don't know that I cultivate joy. I think I experience it when it happens. And it's not so much joy that I'm looking for. Like, I'm not sort of a very joyful person. Joy is something that for me has always been a challenge. What I like is peace and ease. And that happens when I don't have to work at something, when I can just be with it. I can just be with this relationship, or relationship with my daughter, or my spouse, or my other son, or with anybody, and just be at ease and just be, not have to work at something. So the work is to get to the point where you don't have to work. Daniel?
Well, I'm not going to dodge the question like you did, because I actually do think you cultivate joy with me. I just don't think you notice it. You cultivate joy with me when you marvel in me. You cultivate joy when you stop, you pause, and you acknowledge something you see in me that brings you joy. And you've been doing it a whole lot this year when we were working on the book. And I love that. I love to see it. When you stop and you really see me, you are actually I don't use the word cultivate. I use the word, you're developing a taste bud for it. You're developing the taste bud for an unfamiliar flavor. You're like, oh, that's that flavor. I really like that flavor. You could say you're developing a neural pathway. So yes. I see you doing it all the time, even if you don't experience it. I think you have a bit of, just like Nicole, you have an idea about yourself that you're not a joyful person. You love being joyful.
Daniel, stop a second. Thank you for analyzing your father. How about answering the question? You're for yourself.
I'm not analyzing you. I'm reflecting back to you that you are full of joy.
I'm only asking you, how about answering the question for yourself?
I'm about to.
Sorry?
I'm about to, but did you get what I said?
I got what you said, and the word that hangs me up is cultivate. You're quite right.
I don't use that word either, but the word joy shouldn't hang you up because you're full of it. For me, what brings me joy is new levels of understanding and humor and relaxation with my father. When our differences can, when the friction and the tension of our differences, instead of sparking conflict or pain, actually sparks a really beautiful firework between us, and that neither of us needs to be different in order to delight in the other. And yeah, when he acknowledges me, honestly, when he pauses and marvels at his son, then I really feel like I'm looking at my actual father, you know? And I didn't say this earlier, but writing the book with you, Dad, has been one of the joys of my life. I mean, what an opportunity I get to have. What an absolutely rare, precious opportunity that I'll always cherish, quite aside from whatever impact our book has, you know? It's an honor to collaborate with you on this and on everything, and to makes me appreciate just being in the world with you.
Well, speaking of acknowledgement, then I'll acknowledge you for your wonderful work tonight and preparing for tonight. And I really look forward to working with you next week.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I agree.
Thank you. I will jump on the acknowledgement train and say thank you to Gabor and Daniel for these. I think Daniel just mentioned fireworks. Wonderful to have you here. I'll remind folks there is an opportunity to spend next weekend with these two brilliant gentlemen to do exercises to go into breakouts with a partner. You can come on your own. As attendees of tonight, you get $25 off of that workshop. And so that code is HELLO25. We'll post that in the chat, and we'll hope to see you again soon. So as folks leave, I'll invite you to unmute yourselves and say goodbye, and we'll wave you off. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Take care, stay safe.